What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Manny here, welcome back to the channel. It is time to talk about another very interesting and rather spectacular rock climbing technique. In this episode we're gonna take a closer look at dynos. Now, dynos are not exactly my strength. I don't dyno a lot, I don't do a lot of competitions where I usually have the biggest, the furthest and the most spectacular dynos, so you could say I'm the wrong person to make this video. On the other hand, because it's a weakness of mine, I had to put some effort into the strategic aspects of dynos, otherwise I wouldn't stand any chance on these moves at all, and as always I'll try my best basically to deliver my conclusions to you via this video. Let's get started. Let's start with the boring stuff, the definition. For me, a dyno is a climbing move after which the climber has to let go of his feet for whatever reason, mostly because the starting position is far below the target hold, but also maybe because he's lacking the necessary body tension to keep his feet on the wall, which would transform the move into merely a dynamic move, and I've talked about these in the previous technique episode. That means that the borders between dynamic moves and dynos are somewhat blurry on the wall. For some people, the dyno is a dyno, and for others it's just a dynamic move. Boring stuff done, let's get into the details. What can we do to increase our chance for sticking dynos from a technique point of view? You might say, well, there is not really a lot to it. You basically jump off as hard as you can, try to grab the target and hope for the best, right? Well, you might be surprised what a big difference a slightly different approach on a certain dyno can make, but let's start with the basics. Let's take a look at this move, which is basically a standard one-handed dyno. As you can see, I'm creating some distance from the wall with my hips first, so that I can later close this gap to gain momentum for the actual move. And this pattern is generally a very effective one already when we talk about merely dynamic moves. And the reason why this works is that it transfers your body weight onto your legs in the moment of acceleration. And as you know, the legs are a very strong muscle group. They are not only longer, but they are also stronger than your arms. So this approach will usually get you the furthest simply. I would call this variation the leg dominant approach, and its mechanics become even more apparent when we move from the single-handed dyno towards the double-handed dyno, or simply the double dyno, where the climber is removed completely from the climbing wall for a short moment of time. Again, you can clearly see how the hips are used to firstly transfer the body weight onto the legs, and this can be subsequently exploited to create even more momentum with your legs by pushing your body upwards, pushing your body towards the target hold. I would say this approach works in about 77.5% of the cases and is therefore a good rule of thumb to follow when you encounter a real dyno for the first time. Now you might ask, what is the second approach? Well, this wouldn't be my channel if I wouldn't give you also the tools to solve the residual 22.5% of dynos, so let's get into it. Let's take a look at this dyno. As you can see, the terrain is very steep, much steeper than in the examples that we had before. Now when we use a complete leg dominant approach again, something interesting will happen. We're going to push ourselves out of the wall so much that soon the body won't move into the direction of the target hold anymore, and we're going to miss it, or at least have a very hard time sticking it. What is more ideal in this situation is when the arms are used actively, not only to generate some force themselves, but also to steer the force generated by the legs and the hips back towards the wall, which kind of delays the point of closest contact between the climber and the wall and therefore alters the flight path slightly to the better. I would call this variation the arm dominant dyno, although still a lot of force is coming from the legs, but arms play a significant role in this one as well. And it's kind of hard to describe, which is why I'm going to simply show you another example here. Again, very steep, and pay special attention to the arms of the climber. Now, as you can see, they are not even bent during the acceleration phase, which gives the climber a slightly different jumping direction compared to the leg dominant version of this dyno, which helps him to stick the target. Now here's the thing, as always in climbing, we can't really say that one technique is superior to another, rather we have to analyze the situation correctly and make the right decision. So the question arises, in which situation the leg dominant approach and in which situation the arm dominant approach? Generally, on relatively flat, relatively vertical terrain, the leg dominant approach will give you the best results. Simply because these problems are all about getting the highest jump possible, regardless of any obstacles, regardless of target hold quality, and legs are going to help you a lot with that. Now the story changes quite a bit as soon as we bring steepness into the game, because now the wall acts as an obstacle in and of itself, in the way of the flight path generated by the leg-dominant approach. Therefore, the arm-dominant approach becomes more and more advantageous the steeper the terrain is, in my experience. Apart from maybe those few cases where the wall is shaped in such a perfect concave way, making the leg-dominant approach still possible. But even then, there is one more thing to consider, and that is the quality of the target hold or holds. Because on steeper terrain, the leg-dominant approach will also result in more swing on the target, because you're putting much more energy into the horizontal direction of the jump compared to the arm-dominant approach, and this will run you into a problem when the target is not a complete jug. Therefore, I'd say on very steep terrain with suboptimal target, a more arm-dominant approach might work better. And of course the borders between those two versions are somewhat blurry, so there exists all kind of mixtures between leg dominant and arm dominant, which might be suitable for all kinds of problems out there. And in order to make the story more complete, I would like to add here that leg and arm dominant variations do not only exist in the plane perpendicular to the climbing wall, but also in the plane of the climbing wall itself, which becomes apparent on Dynos which are going more to the side. And here again, steepness of the terrain, quality and especially directionality of the target holds will help you to make your decision. And finally, back to where we started, the whole swinging out chapter is also relevant on single-handed dynos and also simple dynamic moves on which you don't even necessarily have to lose your feet. On steep terrain, such a move will always result in more swing if the center of gravity of the climber was very close to the wall in the starting position, which makes sense from a mechanics point of view, because very close to the wall in the starting position means big swing out in the end. So it sometimes might make sense to violate the rule, always keep your center of gravity as close to the wall as possible, to avoid this kind of swing, this bad swing in the end of the execution of the move, especially when your target hold is a little bit bad. Alright guys, I think I've rambled enough about dyno technique. Please don't forget that there are also a lot of other skill and physical factors involved in these moves, like for example explosiveness, contact strength, coordination, especially hand coordination, you know, on these double, triple dyno crazy stuffs. And of course also, not least, body morphology. So just because your dyno technique is on point, that doesn't mean that you're going to stick every dyno now. But I mean, that goes for all climbing moves basically, right? So yeah, as always, don't forget to drop some likes and comments. As always, if you've got something from this video, I'd highly appreciate it. It helps a lot. And until then, guys, I think stay strong. I'll see you soon. Bye. Ooh, that snap was good.